Philippe Auclair is with us, French football journalist. Good evening, Philippe.
Good evening to you, Nathan. Good evening, everyone.
Why do footballers pull their shorts up when they're taking a corner kick? Is it a signal?
It probably is. Actually, I was just thinking of it. I have to say it made me laugh, but I was wondering if you pull the right thigh or the left thigh or both, does it mean in-swinger, out-swinger, far post, near post? I don't know.
We'll ask Jack Byrne the next time we see him, and then we'll have a definitive. This is the question that football fans didn't even know they needed the answer to. But Shamrock Rovers, by the way, just had a great chance. Sorry for half keeping an eye on that, but we'll give you our full attention right now, Philippe. So we want to talk to you because this story emerged on Tuesday that Kylian Mbappé was unhappy at Paris Saint-Germain and wanted to leave the club. And I, like a lot of people when I first read it, assumed maybe something had come up in my Twitter feed from 6 months ago, and had we not been through this already, and it's been settled, and he's calm and he's satisfied, and Paris Saint-Germain are top of the league, and it looks as though that front three are having a bit more cohesion, and himself and Messi are both managing to click. And then you read a little bit deeper and it seems that Mbappé isn't happy with the transfer strategy from last summer. There's been a breakdown with his relationship with Neymar, not happy where he's been asked to play by the new head coach Christophe Galtier. Now this has been denied by almost everybody, it seems, since then, particularly Paris Saint-Germain and the club's sporting director, who says he's with Kylian Mbappé every day. He has never talked to me about leaving in January. It's not a statement from the player, it's from the press. And to have such information before a match like this is very dangerous. That's why I'm here to deny and say that Kylian Mbappé has never spoken to me or the president to leave Paris Saint-Germain in January. Where does the truth lie?
Wow. There's a lot to unravel, isn't there, in there? First of all, what we've learned, and which is a fact, is that Mbappe's contract is not as long as we thought it would be. As in, the last year of the contract is actually an optional one. So which means that he's got a little bit more leeway in terms of where he wants to pursue his career. He's still a very young player, and we all know where he wants to pursue his career. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing is that, yes, what is being said at the moment in French media about the atmosphere within the camp, everything is absolutely true. It's a complete mess. And I have to say, I have to do a mea culpa because, in all honesty, I think when I came on here to talk about PSG at the beginning of the season, I thought they were onto something because they had a manager which I thought was perfectly capable of transforming them into the European Cup winning or Champions League winning team that the Qatari owners wanted PSG to become. And the first matches certainly showed a PSG that was exactly that. They had changed their tactical setup with three at the back. Everything seems to be working. Messi was back in form. Neymar probably having the best season at PSG. Actually, I think probably his best season at PSG. Mbappé being still very, very, very good, but this was all a facade, and this is what we're discovering now. The stories about what's happening with Mbappé and his manager, and with Nasser Al-Khelaifi and Luis Campos and the people at the top of the club, unfortunately, I'm afraid it's true. And there is a genuine problem there. It seems that promises were made to him, which is a very foolish thing to do to a player, about the recruitment and the type of system that they would adopt, in which Mbappé wouldn't be put on the wing, so to speak, and would be associated with the proper number 9 up front, something like that. It's all a bit complicated and all a bit surreal, I must say. But it seems that all those discussions took place and that he decided to, sign a new contract for PSG when everybody expected him to sign for Real Madrid on the strength of the promises he'd been made. And these promises apparently were not kept. Now, this is something that wouldn't necessarily be so unusual. There is an awful lot of toing and froing and smoke screens and promises which cannot be kept. But what has come into the light over the last couple of days is something a little bit more serious, and which explains, I believe, a lot of what has been going on, which is the fact that PSG apparently have been hiring a PR company called, if you can believe it, Digital Big Brother, to create fake accounts. This is an allegation which has been published by the French news website Mediapart, and has been taken on by absolutely every single media in France. By the way, I want to reassure you, you're not risking, anything.
Well, I was just going to say that Paris Saint-Germain released a statement completely and totally denying the claims.
I was about to say
that. They say that they've never contracted with an agency to undermine any person or institution.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but a former employee of that particular company explained that, or told Le Parisien, which is a French daily, which is follows very closely PSG, that in fact, that's what he said. That's not what we are saying. That everything that they had done, which is creating these fake media, social media accounts, which were basically saying very bad things about Kylian Mbappé, among other people, and journalists who were not necessarily favorable or not favorable enough to PSG. Everything was done in collaboration with the club. This is quote unquote, by the way, from the piece published in Le Parisien today. So this story is going to run and run, basically, because I would imagine that Kylian Mbappé had some prior knowledge of what was going to be published in Mediapart and Le Parisien and now Le Figaro and everywhere in the French press. And I think that his reticences, which have been made public over the last few days and few weeks, perhaps should be seen in a different light when you know what is going on in the media landscape in France. But in any case, Nathan, it's basically chaos. It's a mess. We thought they had finally found some kind of equilibrium. They've got a great manager. I genuinely believe that Christophe Galtier is a perfect manager for them. Messi was back in form. Neymar was fantastic. Mbappé was finding his form, let's put it that way. And then suddenly this, makes everything completely almost, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. French football is mad, Philippe, isn't it? French football is absolutely insane.
Yeah,
I'm looking at English football and how crazy everybody went for the Wagatha Christie trial. And now you look at this and you think of French football in the last few years where you had the Benzema Valverde scandal, everything that's gone on with Paul Pogba in the last few weeks.
The French Federation French Federation as well.
And now this, it's absolute insanity.
It's to be honest, it's a bit the same in England. I think that the libel laws have got a lot to do with the fact that we perhaps do not unearth the same stories in the United Kingdom as we do in France, where we've got a little bit more leeway in the media. But I have to say, yes, you're quite right. It's been absolutely crazy.
So go back to the summer then, Philippe, and those weeks where it looked as though it was a done deal that Kylian Mbappé was leaving Paris Saint-Germain and decided to turn down Real Madrid, and it seemed completely stunned Real Madrid. It was so far along that they expected that this deal was going to happen. How and why did he stay at that moment, and just how watertight were those guarantees that he seems to have been given that became pretty public quite quickly, that he was almost a de facto sporting director at the club and that no major decision would happen before he knew? Is that something that was ever written down, or was that, as you say, just part of a negotiation that Paris Saint-Germain clearly seemed to have got badly wrong that they'd ever be held to account for?
I would love to be able to give you a positive answer to this, because it would mean that I would have access to the contract that Kylian Mbappé signed with PSG, and I'm afraid I don't have access to that. What I have access to is some information from people who are close to what happened, and they all said that it was quite clear that in the discussions which took place between Mbappé and the club, it was made clear that the player would have a great deal, he would have his say in the way things were being done. He would have a status perhaps not unlike the status that Lionel Messi had, for example, at Barcelona in his last few years there, which is an informal status, but it's unsaid, but it means that if you take a big decision in terms of recruitment, you talk to the main player, as in Kylian Mbappé, who is supposedly, given his age, which is quite natural, is supposed to be the future of this club. Lionel Messi is not eternal, as much as we might regret it. Neymar is getting on a little bit. He had a renaissance this season, but how long will it last? Mbappé is the future of that club. So they were desperate to keep him, which explains why he apparently got an absolutely humongous signing on fee, and why they were prepared to give him guarantees, at least verbal guarantees, that his opinion would matter a great deal when they took decisions which affected the team as a whole. And what he's not too happy about is that what he had been told at the time, informally, is not something that the club has done. They have opted for taking basically the team of LOSC, of Lille Olympique, who were champions at the expense of PSG not that long ago. Christophe Galtier, the manager, and Luis Campos, the sports director, bring them in, which I think was an excellent idea, but it hasn't worked out perhaps the way they wanted it to. And it seems like this club has to be dysfunctional to function. And some clubs are like that. Chelsea's like that, used to be like that in England, certainly under Roman Abramovich. Everything was always crisis, convulsion, resolution of convulsion, crisis, title. It was always like that. PSG is a bit like that, but without the European title they're craving.
Like when you say it's not working out, obviously with the Mbappe side it's not working out, but they are top of the league. They haven't lost a game so far. They're scoring a hell of a lot of goals, and they're not really conceding many goals. In the Champions League, all right, they've had a couple of draws with Benfica, but they're going to qualify for the next stage. So as you say, it does look from the outside as if Galtier is doing a good job. And it may be a remarkable job if all of this is going on behind the scenes and he's still getting them to perform. It's Neymar's best season at the club, Messi delivering this year in a way he didn't last season. What sort of on-pitch influence does Mbappe hold with the team from your understanding and from what you've seen? Like, is there an acceptance around the club, even with the giants of the game, such as Messi and Neymar being there, that Mbappe is still the main man?
Well, that's a bit of a problem because, in a way, Messi and Neymar have been producing more than Mbappe has done since the beginning of the season, certainly for PSG, Neymar in particular, but Messi has been terrific at times. And it seems that there is a breakdown, shall we say, of communication between those two and Kylian Mbappe. It's been remarked upon, for example, by analysts, statisticians, when they look at the number of goal chance creating passes that one was doing to the other, that it seems to be very much a two-way traffic between Messi and Neymar and Messi, and then Mbappe is not really part of a triangle, which is what Galtier would have expected and would have hoped for, and which is the way the reason he's deployed his team as he has, as a kind of 3-4-3, is precisely to find a way to have those three together and combining together. And to be honest, it was quite promising. But in this setup, Mbappe is not the main man. And quite clearly, there is an ambition to be the main man. So you've got a zone of friction here, which, as long as the club and the team win, it's not too much of a problem. But when you add to that what we've learned over the last couple of days, and we realize, there have been problems in the background that perhaps we were not aware of, and also those promises which were made to him in the summer to convince him to stay at PSG, I think many people at the time thought that was a lot of, media fluff. Well, maybe it was not. And it's now hitting home. And it's hitting home as well 4 weeks before the beginning of the World Cup, which is not exactly great timing for the French team, which has already got all these problems. And, too many to mention, to be honest. We would need the whole evening to mention the problems that the French team has at the moment. And this explains that. And And again, we are in a situation where every time with PSG, when we think they finally found a balance, and we thought that with Carlo Ancelotti, and we thought that with Laurent Blanc, and we thought that with Mauricio Pochettino up to a point, we felt that with Thomas Tuchel. Every time we think they've got there, they manage, if you excuse the expression, it's 21-26, they manage to screw it up.
Yeah, well, I guess when you dance with the devil, as they tend to on a regular basis, it seems problems are just around the corner.
Yes.
In terms of Mbappe's personality, and I know it's very hard to get access to players, and we have to, watch from afar and believe what we're fed at times. Like, does this seem out of character the way he's been acting over the past year?
Yeah, certainly a change. Because one of the things I think most people took to Kylian Mbappé to start with was, first of all, he's a really, really smart young man. He's very courteous. He's very funny. He's extremely articulate. He can talk, I think, about anything with anybody, and he will not sound condescending or he will not sound ignorant. He's really, he's really something else. But one thing that perhaps caught people's imaginations and hearts was the joy he took in his own skill, and this seems to have been a bit lost. And we're now seeing another side of him that perhaps wasn't there before. He's still so young, but which is perhaps a little bit more manipulative, which is perhaps more cynical than when we thought, more narcissistic, more egotistical. Which is something we didn't really want to be there, but which is part probably of the armory of any player of that dimension, caliber. He has to protect himself. And you've got to think of the way that he's built his career. He's built his career with the help of a very, very small group of people. I mean, getting to him is almost impossible, to be absolutely honest.
Right. Who are the people close to him?
I mean, his parents. That's it. His parents and his lawyer. And once you've said that, you've said pretty much everything, because you will, and I've come across that, you will talk to somebody who's been presented to you as being close to Kylian Mbappé, and you start talking to that person, then you realize, in fact, he knows the assistant to the dad, or he knows somebody who works for the same practice as the lawyer, something like that. So to get to him is incredibly difficult. He's got this kind of very, very small Praetorian Guard. Wrong image. There were loads of Praetorian Guards in the Praetorian Guard. There are only 3-4 of these people who actually deal with what really matters and who protect him. And they've been trying to define his career from a very, very early age. And when I say that, I'm talking about Mbappé when he was 10, 11 years old. And it's all been put in place. It's been done very, very well indeed. But they had also done it in such a way that they would protect not his innocence, but the fact that he would keep his feet on the ground and so forth. And at the moment, the impression we get is that what they had managed to do is not quite what is happening at the moment. That we are seeing a new Mbappé who is not quite as efficient and potent on the football field as he's been. Who is more indisciplined, which is something we already felt in his game last year, and who perhaps has an idea of himself which is not conducive to the best of relationships with his club, because he's very much presenting himself as being the crux of that club, and he's not. If it is January then, and it's a different build-up to a January transfer window, because there's the World Cup between now and then, and maybe players are away from their clubs for a while, and it's a bit easier to make these sort of decisions. How different a transfer would it be to Real Madrid in January compared to last summer in terms of transfer fee, in terms of other clubs potentially been interested? I don't think this is going to happen. I really don't think it's going to happen. To be honest, I think we're looking at next summer, if anything is going to happen. I wouldn't put anything past PSG or Mbappé at this stage, to be absolutely honest. It might be, it might be as well that the nascent scandal that we have about this army of trolls, who have been allegedly employed by PSG, is turning into a really, really big scandal in France, in which case it's going to be very difficult for PSG to keep Mbappe. If it's, imagine if for 1 second, and this is a hypothetical situation, obviously I am not accusing PSG of anything, but imagine for 1 second that a PR company directly employed by PSG, answering PSG for their strategy, their tactics, decided to target one of their own players named Kylian Mbappé. I mean, come on, you've got to go. I mean, there's
you'd assume the club are preparing for him to go if that's the situation.
Yes,
that's what they're conducting.
I know. It's basically an absolute mess. It's a typical PSG mess. I would say that at the moment it looks as if anything is going to happen, it's going to be at the end of the 2022-2023 season, not in the winter transfer window.
What about Lionel Messi's future then? There's been a lot of speculation that he could return to Barcelona next summer and finish his career back there. Is that looking like a likely scenario?
Likely, I don't know, like a possibility, yes. There's also a court case which is going to be heard in not too long about the transfer from Barcelona to PSG. It's really a bit messy. Apologies for the terrible pun, but it's a little bit messy as well in this particular case. On the other hand, he's been playing some really very, very good football with PSG, and he's actually one of the reasons the quality of the football he's been playing for PSG is one of the reasons why many people think, and I'm one of them, that Argentina are a really, really good bet for the World Cup. So that's how good he's been. The first season, which was so frustrating for him because of all the injuries and stop start constantly, that's not been the case. We're seeing the real Messi again, and yes, I mean it is a possibility, but again, a lot will depend on what's happening to that crazy club, because so many rumors are flying around. I mean, don't forget there were rumors as well as the Qataris past the World Cup deciding to put the club for sale, for example. That's one of the many rumors which have been circulating. And unfortunately, or not, by the way, it seems that the club cannot shed this identity of incompetence. Excuse me, but that's the word that comes to my mind, and I think it is the right word. And it might be that one point Messi has had enough and decides, you know what, going back to my hometown, as it were, Barcelona.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens, as you say, post the Qatar World Cup, because if Mbappe leaves, if Messi leaves, Neymar is over 30 now. There was an assumption, even up to recent months, that Paris Saint-Germain could go on and dominate European football and command the very best players in the world.
I mean,
we did a piece recently on how football transfers are almost overtaking the matches as being the most main talking point and the main interest for people who follow football now. But the potential knock-on effect from an Mbappe move in terms of the best players in the world post the World Cup, you'd imagine it's going to spark many transfers.
You would, absolutely, but we are entering a kind of almost kind of Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones dimension here, because it's fantasy. It genuinely is fantasy football, because at the same time you've got all the rumors, and good Lord, I've heard those rumors many a time about the status of Erling Haaland at Manchester City, and the fact that Real Madrid have got a very strong interest in him, and that in 2 seasons' time or 1.5 season time they could be coming to knock at the door, and there is a clause in his contract. It's absolutely crazy, really. But when it comes to PSG, what you've got to realize is that it's a club which has now it's got itself amongst the 5 richest clubs on the planet. You might not like the way it's managed to do that. I don't. I think it's not necessarily commendable. I think it's questionable, but the fact is they are. And therefore they can do things that other clubs simply can't do. State-sponsored clubs can do things that no other clubs can do. Manchester City, okay, people say it's not state-supported. It's owned by the brother of the president of the UAE, and who is himself Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Presidential Affairs. Then you've got Newcastle, obviously, with PIF and the Saudis, and then you've got PSG. These three clubs are in a different dimension altogether. And therefore, what they want to do, they can do, because they've got the means to do so. So I wouldn't make any bets about what's going to happen with PSG. It can be that they find the money to make an absolutely crazy offer, which convinces Mbappé to stay beyond, what should be the natural length of his contract and carry on. It's totally possible. It's possible that they go in with a crazier. I mean, they did it for Neymar. Remember, when they got Neymar, who actually believed that they would get him at the time? I didn't for a long time. I thought this was crazy. Barcelona would never get rid of somebody like Neymar, and they did. So, yeah, it's completely unpredictable, and unfortunately, it's not the kind of unpredictability that makes you love football.
No, I suspect even in a way it feels quite depressing that we're already talking about Erling Haaland's future at Manchester City 2 months in, and almost preordained plan that he will move on to another super club for another massive fee, and he'll spend 3 years there and return somewhere else, and the money just keeps circling between the same 5 or 6 clubs constantly. You mentioned Manchester City, of course. They do need to bring money into the club. They do need to pay their way, and they've got many partnerships, many sponsorship deals, many of them with companies associated with Abu Dhabi, and also a new betting partner in recent weeks, which you've been writing about, a partner called 8xBet, who seem to operate from the UAE, but there seems to be very little known about. What can you tell us about this and why it's interesting?
It's very interesting indeed for many, many reasons. I mean, one of the main reasons is trying to understand how it's possible for gambling companies which operate mainly in the Far East, which means operate mainly in countries where gambling is illegal, and actually if you gamble, you can end up in jail if you are in a Chinese citizen or a Vietnamese or Thai citizen, Malaysian, so forth. But there are companies which make an awful lot of money out of taking bets on sport, particularly football, and obviously the Premier League is a prime target for that. And what Premier League clubs, especially big clubs, can give those bookmakers, who are illegal and many of whom are controlled by criminal organizations, and I say that on the record, and believe me, this is the truth. The UN says so too. They can find a form of they can justify their existence, and they can give them respectability by teaming up with clubs who might not be aware, and who might not be aware of their true nature. And it's something which has fascinated me for a long time, and with a few friends and investigative journalists, we have looked into that, and we've looked into the case of 8xBet, which happens to be the company that Manchester City has signed a deal with as their Asian betting partner. Now, there's already a problem there, because betting in Asia, as I said, is illegal in most countries. That's the first problem. The second problem is that this company has got a license to operate in the UK. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be a sponsor of Manchester City. Going through an Isle of Man company, which is what's so-called white label company. You know what white label companies are? It's like when you go to the supermarket and you buy the local, the Asda, Tesco, whatever, baked beans. They're made by another company, but which is kind of the white label. So basically, these people are agents. So somehow these companies, which should never be allowed to operate in Britain, get a license through an agent. But fine. I mean, okay. Even up till then, you think it's a bit dodgy. But when we looked more closely, we realized this company actually doesn't really exist. And we also realized this company seems to be operated by a PR agency which is working in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And it doesn't seem to have genuine existence. And it's something that, bothered us, because it's something that is replicated all through the landscape of the Premier League and many other leagues, by the way.
Sorry, Philippe. So when you say it doesn't exist, so I've just put in 8xbet.com onto the computer here, and it brings you through a first page, which looks like a regular front page for a betting site, and then I click on another link for football, and it says access is restricted, your current location is restricted, contact our customer service. Is that as far as you can go anywhere in the world, or are there parts
no.
access and you can
we actually looked into that, and we actually used various methods and techniques. I'm not going to go too much into details because I don't necessarily want to explain how we work. But we accessed these websites in their iterations in Southeast Asia, for example, in Vietnam, in Thailand, and they constantly change. It's like imagine the game of whack-a-mole, right?
Yeah.
Because the authorities there want these people not to operate because it's illegal. Basically, it's illegal. So every time that one particular website is identified and closed, another one goes up, another 2, another 10, another 100. The numbers are absolutely extraordinary. And the crazy thing for this particular sponsor is that they seem to have all these iterations. Their offices, we looked at them. I mean, their head office, we located one of them, was in a mobile phone shop in a very, grotty phone shop in Da Nang in Vietnam. It just doesn't make sense. And basically, English football is taking in an awful lot of those gambling companies, which target Asian customers in particular, without any proper due diligence. That is what I say. We've put the question to them on a number of occasions. We've put the questions to the Premier League. We've put the questions to the UK Gambling Commission on a number of occasions. We've never had proper answers to that. And it's rather sad if it comes down to a team of journalists, Steve Mannery, Andy Brown, Jack Kerr, and myself in this case, to go down and investigate those guys and to say, hello, hold on a second. You've just signed a deal with a company that doesn't seem to really exist and might be, and I said might be, a money laundering operation. And we've done that for a number of others. At one point, Nathan, last year we found a company called Yabo Sports, which sponsored Bayern Munich, Leicester, PSG, Manchester United, you name it, biggest names on the planet, Argentinian Federation. And when we looked at what they were doing and we looked at the contracts they had signed, and we could find pictures of, signing ceremony. And we looked at the CEO who was supposed to be there. And when we did a little bit of research, we realized that the CEO was a male model, an actor. I'm not inventing this. It sounds crazy, but it's absolutely true. It's all
what are the clubs saying? Like, what are the clubs when you go to?
The club don't say a thing because nobody says a thing.
So what they're doing is the money comes in, and then they say sponsors for a year, and they move on. They get another betting partner next year.
Exactly. And some of those betting partners, to be honest, have been there for a long, long time. I think Fun88, whom you will see on Newcastle shirt, had been in the game for a long time. I think their first deal was Tottenham Hotspur back in 2007, 2008. Apologies if it was 2006-07. But they've been around for a long time. And also those brands, there are loads of brands, but we are almost convinced that, or we are convinced, that those brands are actually iterations of a few major operators who happen to have, different brands. Just like when you look at what Nestle has and you realize, oh, it's Nescafe and it's this and it's this and it's that, it's exactly the same thing. And when it comes to the English clubs and clubs on the continent as well, what these people come to them through agents, basically who are based in the UK, and they propose quite a lot of money, more money perhaps than any other sponsor of that kind would propose. So the temptation, especially you're coming out of COVID, the financial state of football is a little bit dodgy, shall we say, for many clubs. Somebody comes to you and say, I'm going to pay you 5 million quid to put my name on your shirt. That's 2 million more than anybody else. You do your due diligence as in, oh, who's talking to me? Who's doing this? No criminal record, no bad debt. That's fine. Sign. You don't go further than that. But in fact, you should be going further than that. And apart from the fact that you're sponsoring that you're giving credibility to an activity which, let's be absolutely frank here, is illegal where it is being pursued. These are not British or European-based gambling companies. They are targeting Asia, where gambling is illegal. And I sometimes I get the feeling we're hitting our heads against the wall here, banging our heads against the wall, because I know this represents money which matters to English football, well, to some clubs, that is. But on the other hand, I'm just wondering, how is it possible to ignore this? You know, we've banned smoking, advertising for smoking and alcohol. Why don't we ban advertising for companies which, to be honest, are very questionable, to say the least? And I'll keep it at that. And I'll just say one thing, Nathan. If you want to know more about it, that this is my little advertisement.
Go for it.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. A lot of the investigation that Steve, Andy, Jack, and myself have done in this has been presented on an English-speaking Norwegian website called Josimar Football. Josimar, you know, as the famous Brazilian player.
Yes, yeah.
JosimarFootball.com. You can go there and you'll find all of our stuff there. And I have to say, I have to thank you, Nathan, for giving me a chance to talk about this, because we found it very difficult, even though we believe that it is a very, very important topic to discuss, especially in the light of the gambling review happening, or not happening, as it were, in the UK at the moment.
Well, there's so many parts to it, Philippe. We might actually come back to it again at some stage, because, as you say,
I would love to.
There's the question marks over gambling firms on jerseys, and then there's actually where the money is coming from. And the second you click on a link as to why these companies that nobody knows anything about, that don't seem to really operate, why they would want to spend all this money with football clubs. Unfortunately, we're out of time, Philippe, but it's been a pleasure as always.
It's been my absolute pleasure, and thank you again for this opportunity to vent my bile.
It's all right. It's all right. The beautiful game, eh? Philippe Auclair.
Yes, indeed.
Shamrock Rovers 2-0 now, by the way, against Molde, conceding a header from a set piece, and still scoreless between Manchester United and Ammonia Nicosia. I think United have had over 30 shots in that game in the last minute. We'll give you the full times right after these.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Liverpool take on champions Man City on Super Sunday. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.